I've made myself a meat cake mod. The idea behind the meat cake is that it works like sweet veggie cake, but you can use a meat cake to heal only the carnivores. Made in the cooker or the cook pot, you'll basically, under the consumables, you'll find a meat option for the meat cake, as opposed to the vegetables with the veggie cake. I tried to make it somewhat in line with the veggie cake, where it uses all the different types of meat, as well as still uses some sap and some honey to make yourself this wonderful, wonderful, tasty treat for your dinosaurs. We're going to chuck... Oh, the saddle's already on that one. So this one hasn't been leveled up, so we're going to chuck a bunch of experience to simulate this. And then we cause some damage by leveling it up into health. Now we'll see here that the numbers are going up, you know, half at a time, about 0.6 probably. But then we put the meat cake in, and it actually chomps on one, boom. We'll start seeing these jump up by about, that looks like 35, 40-ish at a trot. And so it's basically taken 10% of the almost 14,000. You divide that by 0.1, so obviously it's 1,300. And then you have to then divide that by 60, because there's about 2 ticks in every second. And that will end up being roughly what... is being provided to the allo right now. So it's definitely a work, it's not a work in progress, it is a working functional meat cake. I've only really tested it on the allos, but it works and it does the job. And yeah, do with it what you will. It's up on the CurseForge right now for anyone to use. And we'll go into how I actually put it together. So if you're just interested in the mod, there it is. Otherwise, if you're interested in how I went about it, let's get stuck into it now. So, to be able to create the mods, you will need to go and get yourself an Epic Games logon and locate the Ark dev kit. It's a bit of a monster. It looks like unpacked at 732 gigabytes. I think the download was 600 gigabytes. Took quite a long time. So it is quite a hefty application. So you're going to need to make sure that you've actually got quite a significant amount of space to be able to utilize the dev kit. And probably make sure you have it on a solid state drive, as it takes a long time to do anything. So you want a nice decent machine, and you want everything on solid state with lots and lots of space. Now that we've actually got the editor open, we want to go up to the menu at the very top of the screen for the user generated content, and you want to create a mod. Currently down in the menu down the bottom we can actually see my meat cake mod, but we're going to create a new one and actually step through what it is I did. I chose a blank mod. There's a bunch of different templates here that you could utilize, but for this one we're just going to give it a blank mod. We're going to call it meat cake 2, and we'll create a mod. Okay, with our mod created, we're actually looking at the content browser down the bottom. Probably under Shooter Game is where you're actually going to find these things. So Meat Cake 2 content has actually been placed under the plugins folder, which is then also under the content and all. So what we will want to do is find our Meat Cake 2. We're going to right click on that and add to favorites. That way we'll have a nice little section at the top here where we can actually see what we're working with. And as you can probably see with my original meat cake stuff, it doesn't have quite the same things in there. We don't actually need the blank mod, I believe it was. Let's have a look. We don't need the blank mod, and we don't need the level. So these two here, we can actually select them together and delete them. We actually need to bring in a copy of the veggie cake. So we're going to click on the content browser in all, we'll type in veggie to search through and try and find the thing that we're actually looking for. In this case it is the consumable, the sweet veggie cake. And when I drag that over to add it into Meat Cake 2, we can actually see that it says move or copy. And from here we're actually going to make a copy rather than a move. Okay, and now when we have a look in our folder, removing the filter, we can see we have a new primal item consumable veggie cake. We're actually going to go through now and rename these. So, Meat Cake 2, wherever it says blank mod, Meat Cake 2. Our consumable is no longer going to be a sweet veggie cake, it is going to be Meat Cake 2. So from here we will then want to open up our primal item consumable. You can pretty much just double click on it and it will open the item. So in here we're actually looking here on the right side, we're actually looking at the class defaults. So this big long lovely list in here. So this is all the, I guess, the settings itself of what's going on with the sweet veggie cake. And there's a couple of items in here that we're looking for. So you would have your descriptive name. We don't want to have a sweet veggie cake, we want the meat cake 2, and you can obviously change the description. It's no longer something for herbivores. I did that with my original one. And you can change the icon. What I ended up doing here was changing the tasty icon to something a little bit more brown in picture. I might even be able to find my previous one. Meat cake icon. There we go. It's basically the previous picture just made more of a brown look. The other part to this by itself doesn't actually change anything to do with it actually affecting carnivores or whatever else. You'll actually need to have a look inside the blueprint at these pre-use item and the BP can use. I believe the BP can use, the stuff in here remains the same. There's some checks in here to basically see if it's a raid dino or a boss dino, but none of the creatures actually have that in their settings. But with the pre-use, this is where it actually has to check to see if the creature is a carnivore. And that basically go in here. If the carnivore isn't, or if it isn't a carnivore, it will allow it to move to the next step. So if we actually pull up a creature in here, something like a Therizino underscore character. There it is there. In here, we can actually have a look to see is carnivore. There's actually a setting in that detail section we were looking at for the consumable. Each of the creatures also has this sort of thing, and they have a flag to say whether they're a carnivore or not. And so to fix this, all you would need to do is basically, actually we'll just break link to false. So now we can basically say, is it a carnivore? True. It will then actually move into the next stage. It then does an interesting loop. It took me a little while to work this one out because it has some very odd stuff. There's basically these food effectiveness multipliers, and so each individual creature type has food effectiveness. Well, it's actually more than just food effectiveness. It has all these effectiveness multipliers, and it has a list of all the different foods and what benefit it provides that particular creature, and it will loop through all of these one at a time until it gets itself here. So this is the meat cake, matches with the food from the thing that it's looping over, does a check if they're equal. So basically it's saying, is there a health effectiveness from that food item which is greater than 1, and it matches my current item that I'm looking for. And then this section over here, which is the add character stats, this is 0.1, so that's 10%. It will do 10% of health, and so the stat value down the bottom here, health, it does 10% of health over time, over 30 seconds, with a maximum of 2,100. And that then gets added to the creature as an extra index of the buff that it's going to get. And so if we have a look at the food itself, we go back to these class defaults. There we go. Use item, add character stat values. We can actually see the item that we're actually looking for is actually in the blueprint itself. Use item, add character stats values. It's basically going to add this to item add character stat values as index 2. And when we have a look at this item, it has an array of 2 elements, 0 and 1, and so we'd actually add index 2. And what these actually are is the buff that it's going to give the creature. As a base thing, this particular food gives a food value of 20 upon eating. And then in the second index, we'll actually see that it will give health of 10 upon eating. Whereas we're going to add as another part of that index that is going to get 10% of its health over 30 seconds to a maximum of 2,100 added to the benefit of that particular food item. But it's only if it matches these effectivenesses. And obviously a carnivore is not going to have a food effectiveness for a veggie cake. So you would need to either go through and modify the creature, or in my case, I actually went and just deleted all of this stuff out and just had it that as soon as the branch over here, as soon as it says is carnivore equals true, it actually comes over and sets the array element. And we can actually go and have a look at that in my previous one. Make the veggie cake. So we open that up there. If we have a look at our pre-use, which is open now, we can see that the branch for is carnivore true goes straight to the set array element and adds the index of this item straight to it. Now, I'm not going to bother doing that now, but there were some other things as we were looking at that I noticed need to be addressed. And because now that we've actually set it up so that carnivores are affected by this particular item, you will need to then actually change a couple of other things in here. Item stat info is not interesting. Okay, base crafting resource requirements. So in here, this is where you actually set what is required to make the item. And so in here we've got the honey, we have the water, we have the sap, we have the fibers. So this is all the stuff for a veggie cake. You're obviously going to want to change this to something that's more relevant to a meat cake. So in here we can basically just search in cooked, for example, and we can say cooked lamb chops. It's going to need 25 lamb chops and some long grass, some sap, honey and water, and then obviously whatever else you want to make this thing actually occur. The other thing that we also want to have a look at is the default folder paths. At the moment it is a consumable and index 0, and then there's a vegetable under index 1. And what this is actually is when you look in the cook pot, you will find a consumables folder, and then within the consumables folder you will find vegetables. And so what I ended up doing here is just changing that to meat. So now when you go into the cook pot or the industrial cooker, under consumables there'll be a meat folder, and within the meat folder will appear the meat cake item. And that's pretty much all that is. Now, if you're interested in seeing where these food effectiveness things are, we should be able to look up Therizino. Oh, there we go. Dino settings herbivore medium Therizino. So each character has something along these lines with the dino settings. So dino settings carnivore, dino settings herbivore, and then the size of the creature. So they can be small, medium, large, possibly even different ones, and then the name of the type of the creature. Within that, you then have the effectiveness multipliers. And within here, each of the various indexes of what it was actually looping through before. And we can actually see, at least for the Therizino, they have an item index of the sweet veggie cake, which has a health effectiveness of 50, which is obviously 50 is greater than 1. It satisfies that loop condition from earlier, and it will say, yes, the sweet veggie cake is allowed for this particular type of creature to be able to be used as a healing item. But obviously there was also that previous check to see whether it's a carnivore or not. I had thought that maybe we could just start adding conditionally different elements in here, because obviously with this loop going on here we could sort of go, okay, well, if that doesn't exist, add a new index if you really wanted to, or you could start mucking around with the dino settings and actually add them in yourself as a manual item. But that means that you're changing other assets, and so I felt that the simplest option was to remove this loop check, because all I cared about was, is the dinosaur a carnivore? In which case, yes, just let it eat it and let it be healed from it. So from here, there are still a couple of other things that we need to look into. And so if we have a look at our make content, get rid of our filter. Now that we've got these items, my other one obviously has the meat icon itself, so I'm not going to copy that across. But you will need to open up the mod data asset as well. In here, there's not very much to change, but this is where you're actually signifying to the game that you've made changes that you want to include. The one that we need is additional structure engrams. So within that, we'll have index 0. It's going to be for a class, that's cooking pot. So we grab that. So for the cooking pot, we are going to add an additional item, and when we look up here, we should be able to look up a meat cake. Primal consumable item, we find the one that we're actually working with now. And so what that has actually done is it's adding our new item that we've created to the cooking pot as an additional structure engram. Obviously we need a second one in here where the item is actually the industrial cooker. Industrial cooking pot. Bam. Add an array element with an index of meat cake 2. Done. Alright, we've now modified just about everything. We'll go and see if I've missed anything, and we will see where we're going from there. Okay, so we just double checked that this was actually set. I didn't do the chopping before. We've chopped out the section so that we're now going to make sure this is meat cake 2. Yep. We're going to get, as soon as we do, we actually want to do it from there. We're going to go all the way over there. We don't need to know that. Delete, delete. Okay, so we've now set it up so that it checks to see if it's a carnivore. If it is a carnivore, it will apply this particular setting. So we're going to save, we're going to compile that, and then we're going to close off the window. Open up our test map area. Yep, now that we've actually got the test map area, it's all loaded. So this is basically taken our mod and created a level area that we can play around in. Hit the play button to get it all started. We'll jump in. You are given admin privileges, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. So from here we might as well do GTM so that we can build our industrial cooker and make sure that it actually exists within the menuing system. Alright, foundation, boom, grab the cooker itself. We have a look in here under consumables, under meat. We then have our meat cake. We can actually see, because I didn't modify all the other settings, they're all still there. However, the 25 cooked lamb chops that I did modify are actually in there. And so for the final test, we will spawn ourselves a meat eating character. Give me a saddle, give me some meat cake 2s. Make sure that we're actually using the one that we're playing around with now. And then we give ourselves some experience so that we can hurt the dinosaur. Done. We'll see that the levels are going up only ever so slightly, ones at a time. Pop the meat cake on there, and we should start seeing that the health rapidly increases. Hence, we have actually created ourselves a second meat cake mod. Obviously, I'm not going to upload this, but if you were to go to UGC at the top here, you could then share the mod and we'll upload it into CurseForge. You'll need to go to CurseForge, create yourself an account. Whatever email you've associated with your account, you'll need to associate with your UGC here in the editor. You then basically, it'll upload your mod into CurseForge, and you have to wait for it to cook. It takes a little bit of time, but once it's actually ready and you're able to publish it, you'll publish your mod online and you can then use it in the game. Hence, my initial meat cake content is actually now in the game. But that was it. That was basically how I smashed all this stuff together. That's pretty much it for the meat cake mod. We still do UK mode. Yum yum. Yeah, you eat your meat cake. Lovely orange and yellow aloe that I spawned in. But that's by the by. Thanks for watching. Definitely give me a like and a comment down below if you found this interesting. Otherwise, go and check out my other Ark content. Specifically, I would always love to shout out my Ark Down Under series, my more recent one, which was the first episode on Scorched Earth. I put a hell of a lot of effort into editing that video, and I'd love more feedback whenever I can get it. Anyway, thanks for listening in, and I'll catch you in the next one.